So it's lovely to be here and to have a chance to talk about this theme of restructuring. And we left it to the third day because it's a word that often it provokes all sorts of reactions and nervousness and resistances. Like, who wants to be restructured? None of us, So we thought we'd leave it till today when we'd set a bit of a foundation. Also, we're here in the aula of the general congregation, where all the decisions like GC 36, GC 35 happened. And it's an aula that has a certain importance. And it's kind of a composition of place for you to feel that this meeting also has a certain importance. And if you don't change or help to change or renew the Society of Jesus, who will? This group of people. You're a privileged group, as Pachi said. He was saying, thank God every day for the mission we've been given, even if it's a difficult one. So I want us to just start the presentation, start the next hour together with that in mind. There's a wonderful call or an invitation there for each one of us. Oops, wrong computer. It's a spiritual process, and when Father Nicolas wrote the letter in 2011, that is what he said. It's not a technical, administrative, bureaucratic process. It's a spiritual process. And I love this quotation from Gregory of Nyssa. When you don't know where you're going, so that should be where you're going, that is how you know you're on the right road. It's a really wonderful quotation. You can see the guys in the boat there. They look absolutely terrified. And it's an invitation. Jesus invites us in the journey of restructuring to come to him across the waters of our fears. So maybe I'd ask one of you to read this. Who's got a microphone near them? Can I see somebody with a microphone? Yes, Kevin. Would you read that quote from Matthew 14?
But while Peter was walking on the water, he saw the wind and the waves. He was afraid and began sinking into the water. He shouted, "Lord, save me." Then Jesus caught Peter with his hand, and he said, "Your faith is small."
Thanks, Kevin. So I want to start again in that spiritual moment. We know the end of that story, that Jesus reached out and rescued. But there's a drama. Peter shouted, "I'm going down, Lord, save me." And I think that can be, without dramatizing it, that can be a little sense in some provinces that have been suffering diminishment. What can we do? Save us. It's scary. The future looks uncertain, unbalanced. So the invitation is to come to Jesus across the water, to overcome our fears, to go through our fears. And also to think about where we want to end up when we embark on our process of restructuring. There's some quotes from the 35th congregation. We want to end up with structures of government and ways of proceeding conceived from a greater universality. GC 35 had 3 principles that should guide restructuring. So structures of government conceived from a greater universality. And we are not there. Greater agility, the modernization of the structures of government. We're not really there either. We're quite slow to respond to a world and to challenges that are moving at such a rapid pace. discernment and processes don't necessarily mean we need to take 10 years. When I was sent by my provincial to do work in communications, and I came back from studies, and I said to my provincial, "What would you like me to do?" And he said, "Well, John, we've had 2 commissions and 3 task forces on communications." He said, "Just do anything." And the last principle from the congregation is forms of government that better articulate Ignatian values. This is really the theme of the last 2 days. We had for a while lost our way in too corporate a mentality. Recover our Ignatian charism, go back to the wells and the springs that animated St. Ignatius and Francis Xavier and gave that small group of companions such energy and agility and dynamism. So they're the 3 principles, the 3 places we want to end up. So when you think of your province being restructured, where do you want to end up? Greater universality, the great universal call, unique to the society. Agility, the capacity to respond, and thoroughly Ignatian. The De Statu talks about the need for conversion. Father General says, the reports of the procurators point out that in some parts of the society there is a disordered attachment to many, perhaps too many, apostolic works that are considered important or even indispensable. At times, he says, the attachment is linked to a desire to maintain a powerful or prestigious image of the society in the church and in society at large. A real need for conversion there. We are the minima compania. We're not the Society of Jesus because we have great schools in Dublin or London or New York or wherever, or because we have fantastic universities with reputations like Georgetown or wherever. The second one is, he says, there are provinces in which apostolic work depends on long-standing institutions that require more and more people and resources for their management and administration. They weigh heavily in planning because they have become untouchable. As a consequence, some Jesuits carry too much work, often for a long time, with too little time for rest, for prayer, for formation, or for community. And you'll feel that when you start a planning process, and those of you who've been in planning processes have talked about it. The difficulty of large institutions that can just be roadblocks. It's not necessary that institutions be like that, but it's a temptation for them. Institutions, sociologists say, always protect themselves, always perpetuate themselves. So this road to renewal and hope, which is the focus of the presentation, there are some blocks on that road. This desire for prestige. We can't give up that school, it's so famous. Or the untouchable ministries. So, again, to repeat, what are we hoping for in a restructuring process? Well, this great quote from Jeremiah is quite consoling. I know the plans I have for you, says the Lord. Plans to prosper you and not to harm you. Plans to give you hope and a future. When I work with provinces or religious congregations, that's where I start. It's a great way to send people off to pray, to let the fears come up, but in the context of a God who's provident and kind and generous and who knows the future. Jeremiah. So I'll talk a little bit about the hopes, what are we hoping for, and then the fears. A Jesuit in Ireland, a good friend of mine who died, passed away when I was provincial. Pierce would have known him. Liam Green. Pierce, did you know Liam Green? Yeah. We had a provincial in the 80s who had been to North America. And he had heard about the process of hopes and fears. You know, what are your hopes? What are your fears? So for about 2 years, every meeting in the province had to start with discussing hopes and fears. So finally, a day came, and we started with hopes and fears. And Liam, it came to him, and he said, well, my hope is this will be a short meeting. My fear is that it won't be. So, our hopes. To engage a spiritual process that deepens Jesuit identity and availability. A spiritual process, not a technical one, that deepens Jesuit identity and availability. I was talking to a provincial the other day, and he said, maybe 30% of my men are not really available. Maybe because they're in an untouchable institution or because of personal problems and woundedness. So availability is a great rhetoric thing. The reality, which we found in the Ignatian year, was a grace, just like Ignatius was limping along. The society limps along as well, let's face it. The second hope is to broaden apostolic horizons in practical ways. Father General spoke about vision and then feet on the ground, practical. And then to distribute human and financial resources more effectively in a world with fewer Jesuits and less money. It's another hope from restructuring. And all these ideas, by the way, come from a curious reflection we had on restructuring and a consultation with provincials. To undercut provincialism and ism, so many isms in our world today, individualism, nationalism, secularism, clericalism, provincialism, and underscore universality. Further hopes to assist provinces and regions that are important for the universal mission, but not really viable as independent units. Smaller places, we want to stay there, but you can't have provincial consultors, treasurer, admonitors, superiors, arche. Administration getting in the way of mission. To regroup units formerly dependent on distant capitals into regional units. Example, where's Matthew Charlesworth? There he is. South Africa, where Matthew's from, was part of the British province until 3 or 4 years ago. A distant capital. And now it's part of the Southern Africa province with Zambia, Zimbabwe and Mozambique and about 7 other countries. So to regroup this, to move from a kind of colonial past or to move from a system where we were influenced by a colonial past into something more real. Our hopes again to reassess institutional commitments, to shake up stagnant communities. Can you think of a stagnant community in your province? I think there might be 1 or 2 around. To call into question long-standing practices. We've always done it this way, that are no longer suitable. I pass over some of the practices here in the General Curia and move on to the next point. to go beyond national and ethnic identities. The general is very strong on this. The first companions came from diverse countries or diverse places in Europe that were actually at war with each other. But because they had something deeper, this passionate love of Jesus, they could transcend that. They went deeper. Why do we find it so hard to go deeper, to touch into that depth? Coming from Ireland, there's been a suggestion in the air for 20 years, well, could you link up with Britain? And that suggestion was, well, yes, maybe, someday, not today, not tomorrow. We have a difficult history. Can we go beyond that with real indifference and discern? And to develop a culture of trust and solidarity and collaboration and networking. These are about 10 hopes that have been expressed when we've done brainstorming with major superiors. Just a little sidebar here. This is from a vocations blog that Vivian is working on. Vivian, I think, is probably not here. He's probably cleaning up after the... Oh, he is. Wave there. Yeah. He's developing this blog on Jesuit vocations. So can you read that, Herman? I can't read them exactly. My eyesight's going.
Let's see. See the Jesuit headquarters in Rome with an special guide. 4 elements for the Jesuit prayer. 4 things that make the Jesuit life like a spark. Jesuit celibacy, good or bad? How to be a Jesuit and still follow your dreams. What Jesuit poverty is and isn't. 6 important questions and answers before joining Jesuits. But seriously, are Jesuits poor? And 6 reasons to become a Jesuit.
So what Vivian's trying to do there is touch into this commitment, this passion, this impact, and create a blog that can reach out to younger people, if you like, from the general curia, jumping over the province borders, and hopefully provinces would take those on and translate them and move on with them. That's a small marketing piece. Moving quickly on. So what are we fearing? Our fears. Well, the process takes a lot of time and energy. We've seen that. And people say, well, is it worth it? Merging arche, getting people to talk to each other. Isn't that all a distraction from what we should be doing? And it does not, by itself, address provincialism, the isms I mentioned, the lack of leadership, inadequate planning. In fact, it may distract from interprovincial collaboration. So it's not a magic bullet. If you had problems yesterday when you were a province, you'll have provinces tomorrow when you're joined up with some other province. It's not a magic bullet. Also, it might undercut interculturality. For example, Lithuania, a couple of years ago, became part of the Central Europe province, which is Germany, Austria, Switzerland, all German-speaking, and Lithuania and Latvia have come in. So they were saying, well, will we get merged into this German-speaking entity? Will we matter anymore? A real concern. I don't like the word resistances because it's kind of blaming. I prefer the word concerns, fears, questions, doubts. No one wants to be labeled a resistor. Nacho, you're a resistor. You have concerns, I'm taking them seriously. And keeping units small keeps the provincial close to the people missions and to the works. We had a provincial here recently, and he talked about he was reviewing in a kind of an examine the merging of his province or the creation of a new province. And he mentioned this. And he said, some of the guys were expressing this, that, will I ever see the provincial? And then he said, of course, some are quite happy never to see the provincial. So where has it worked well? Well, what has worked well means, where has it given a sense of consoled agility? I think that's when it works well. There's consoled agility, as opposed to the hyperactivism that the general so strongly condemned yesterday or expressed his concern about. Let's look at Spain. And I warned Juan Pablo over there that I'd be mentioning Spain, and I gave him permission to contradict me, as long as he was nice about it. I can't see that now. Okay, when the new province started, there were over 1,200 members. 1,200 members. And I was the conference president at the time. I remember thinking, will the provincial become a kind of a count of conscience machine, going round to see 1,200 people for 10 minutes each? But they thought about that, so stay tuned. Now, half of them were over 75, but that didn't mean they were going to check out straight away, In fact, when I became Provincial of Ireland, an embarrassing moment for me, my first visitation, my predecessor had decided to downsize a community of 20, and he was building a new house with 12 bedrooms. And at the first meeting of the 20, they said, John, you're a very nice person, but there's only 10 bedrooms. I couldn't very well say, well, you're 85, so you mightn't be around. So I had to sidestep that particular issue. Apostolic platforms is a big part of the new province of Spain. At the beginning, there were 20 platforms to apostolically structure the work. In a few years, they were reduced to 10. Now, what's a platform? Let me try to explain. Here's an Irish person explaining a Spanish platform. Think of a city like Valladolid, which is near Madrid. They had, I think, a parish. They had a university center. They have a social center, and I think something else as well. And in typical Jesuit fashion, the parish people said, well, we're working in the parish. And the university center people said, no, we're very busy in the center. With the platform, they all come together. And the question they discern is, how can we serve the needs of this city? And straight away, you're not glued to your institution. You see, oh, my school is a means. The question is, how are we serving the people here? How are we, there's a we, serving the people of this area? With the parish and the university center and the social center as means. So as a planner, you're helping to bring indifference and freedom. Ignatius had all these little tricks for promoting indifference. He knew people weren't indifferent, but he called us to it. One trick, imagine you're on your deathbed. What would you wish you would have done? Imagine you're advising a good friend. What would you tell him or her? Make the pros and cons on a sheet in 2 columns, etc. So as planners accompanying a spiritual process, how will you promote indifference? I've seen people kind of blame people and say, well, this guy isn't indifferent. Not very helpful. How will you, as a planner, just as if you're a spiritual director helping someone be indifferent, how will you help this large institution that might be untouchable? How will you let them be indifferent? Rather than tell them you should be indifferent, entering into a kind of a should-ism. What would Ignatius do? So this idea of the platforms, I think, has helped in Spain to make people a bit more indifferent about the institutions. They have a delegate for the third age, for people over 75, and he goes around with the provincial on visitation. And the over 75s are free to meet the provincial if they choose. Most of them choose to meet the delegate for the third age. So no one's forced, but it makes the provincial's job collaborative with the delegate for the third age, and it makes it manageable. He's not becoming an account of conscience machine. They have sector delegates and planning delegates to promote renewal. Also quite a positive experience. So what are the pluses that Spain has found? Well, there's a good pool of good Ignatian leaders. So if you want a president of a university, you now have a pool from these former 5 provinces. I remember visiting a small province when I was president of the conference, and they were a great little province. But the provincial said, well, this father is coming back. He's done a very nice doctorate in politics, but I have to make him province treasurer. I was like, what? You've spent money on giving him a doctorate, and now he's province treasurer? So in a small province, you end up trying to fit the person into a job that it's not going to work that well. And it's such a consolation for provincials when you find, wow, this guy fits that job perfectly. So in a larger entity, you have a better chance of this kind of consoling situation rather than that kind of more desolating or forced missioning. Another thing that's happened, and not just in Spain, but local superiors get empowered. When the provincial is busy doing what a provincial should do, namely the future of the province, the strategy, he has to let the local superior get on with being a local superior. Many of you Jesuits here have been superiors or are provincials. And the temptation always is to manage one level down, for provincials to take over the job of local superiors, for superiors to take over the job of ministers, for fathers general to take over the job of provincials. Fatal for the society. Absolutely fatal. But if you've got a good pool of local superiors chosen from a wide group, you have a better chance of avoiding that and a better chance of recovering Ignatian values. In Spain, it was a moment of gradual movement. When they were talking about uniting, there was already a provincial of Spain who didn't have so much power. He only had faculties of coordination. So that was a positive step to build on. So when they considered uniting, the general empowered him to take the process forward. So it was gradual, and there was time for the process. How am I doing on time? Okay. Lessons for us. Well, in that kind of situation, a number of provinces together could start with this kind of networking provincial. I think the wrong phrase is super provincial, in fact. it should be kind of a coordinator of the provinces with some kind of authority to run networks or to be in charge of formation. He might gradually get more authority, but each sub-region would retain a certain autonomy. And the Near East is a good example. The province of Proche-Orient has Egypt, and it has, I think, Jordan, and it has Lebanon, Algeria, Morocco, and each of those places have some level of independence. They haven't just been subsumed or absorbed. There's a great respect that they've built, and they have a whole pattern that they've developed for the Near East. So there's a pattern there for places that have different cultures, that respects those cultures, but still there's a unity together. Southern Africa, 9 countries: Botswana, Eswatini, Lesotho, Malawi, Mozambique, Namibia, South Africa, Zambia, Zimbabwe. It sounds like a litany. Anyone know where Eswatini is? I was down there, I had to get told. It's the quiz of the day. It's a new province, about 330 people. The challenge is the vast territory and the different languages. So they really have a challenge. And the general goes down there on Saturday to launch their new province plan. And I've been involved with them in helping them to move forward in that process. So a planning process that started a year and a half ago, and now they've arrived at priorities. And the next phase in 2024 will be activities, timelines, resources. It's been a huge effort, and the key moment was province retreats, mixing up the Jesuits from different countries, from former provinces. We'd never tried that before, though maybe I think in the US they had, but province retreats have been a huge factor. And I'm saying it's an embryonic province, or it's in its infancy, hence that baby there with the little blue shawl. It's still in its infancy. We can't really do an evaluation. They finished their plan now, and they now have arrived at priorities. So it's if you like, Spain started pretty early and moved forward. Southern Africa, it's a new project. I'd say it's still uncertain. Many challenges still. Matthew has been crucial in helping that province, in helping the provincial, and in helping Andrew Simpasa, who's been the chair of the group. So Andrew, if you're watching, a big hello to you. There they are there on the province retreats. You can see all the faces, the mix of cultures. They look pretty happy. Brazil. Where's Davidson? There you are. When the merging processes started for the 4 provinces and 1 region of Brazil, I think it was? 3 provinces and 1 region. My first mistake. And now they have, I can't read that. Can you read that? Yes.
Later on, by the end of the process, there were only 3 provinces? 1 province.
Yeah, 1 province. Key elements: apostolic platforms. Initially, they had 5, I think, groupings of communities and works, and that was too few, and now they have 20. So they were too radical at the start, and that meant people felt very neglected. So they had to change that. It was a learning experience, a difficult one. But now I think it's in a more stable situation, and Davidson is the socius to the provincial. You might be able to add some more in the question and answer time, David, about that Brazil situation. Britain, Ireland, Netherlands, Flanders. It's been talked about for about 15 years. When I was provincial, we had a group meeting. We had group meetings on it. We had a special meeting of the members of the provinces and regions. Then there was a change of provincials. Doubts and hesitations came in, And now there's a sense, well, is it just too late? Would we end up having a kind of a very efficient joint infirmary for the older people? So there's work to be done there, I'd say, and to really discern together about the many common challenges that area of Western Europe has. A huge secularization, secularism, many, many problems, and yet a thirst for spirituality. So a lot of issues they could tackle in common, like refugees, migration, the anti-migrant movements, the far right. So a lot of potential for action together. So there's a call and a question. Other restructuring examples. Sorry, this is so small. I was doing this in a bit of a hurry this morning from other slides. The US now has 4 provinces, and John Swope spoke about the experience of United States East, and Ed Fassett gave a workshop also. East Timor, EOF, France and French-speaking Belgium have come together, and I was involved with that process a little bit. A lot of preparation went into it. It was done very carefully. I was asking somebody about the fears, and they said, well, the Belgians, they're afraid of being assimilated by the French. And then I asked a French person, and they said, well, we're afraid of the fears of the Belgians. Help me out here, Herman. Australia and East Timor, that's quite carefully phrased. Tell me about that.
Australia and East Timor will have formalized companionship to promote collaboration while keeping the juridical status as it is.
Yes, it's a sensitive topic, and we have Dan here and David. It's very sensitive. East Timor, recovering from the war with Indonesia, recovering from a period of colonization previously. So their identity is a very strong and proud one. That should not be compromised. And so the general and the provincial and the provinces and the consults of the two have been really, really discerning together in a very impressive way. So anybody who's listening or viewing or here who's afraid that somehow Rome will impose something, just say, don't be afraid. That my experience of this has been that when real concerns are raised, they are really listened to. We want greater universality, we want agility, we want all those things, but not at the expense of core Ignatian values. And I think the East Timor, Australia example is a good one. It shows how we're moving forward in a respectful way, in a slow way, in a good way. Central Europe, I mentioned Lithuania before. Hungary dropped out at a certain stage. Again, they were in there, and then listening, praying, having meetings. They discern, not yet, not us, not for now, perhaps in the future. And again, Rome didn't insist. Quite a respectful process. So these are good examples of how you meet a situation, you see the problems, you see the possibilities, you make a real discernment rather than impose a package or a formula. French and English Canada joined together, similar respectful process. And then the new Caribbean province, which I know very little about, so if anybody here works down there, they might talk to us. Okay, so charting a path forward from all of that. Solidarity. From the Dei Statu. Restructuring processes should show solidarity in the distribution and use of financial, human, and other resources. I was joking with Paul Chan, who's the treasurer in Korea, And he said he was very happy that Father General had mentioned the issue of scarce resources yesterday. But it goes on, the Destatu, saying it's a solidarity born from the same seed of fraternity, fratelli tutti, that signals the model of humanity to which we want to bear witness. So it's not just solidarity as a nice word or a nice thing. Underneath this is a whole model of humanity that we as Jesuits and Christians are passionate about. A new model of humanity. Jesus' model. Less fragmentation, more impact. The General made a strong appeal yesterday about this. We cannot go on being as fragmented as we are. We have so many resources, universities, schools, social centers, parishes, talented individuals, money, but it's fragmented. And if we really care about key issues like faith, helping people find God, changing the lives of the poor, we cannot keep being so fragmented. It is just not possible. One idea that's emerging, it hasn't been discussed much yet here, but some kind of idea around what's called global hubs. Dan Madigan and I talked about this when I was down in Australia. Imagine a global hub, for example, on dialogue with Islam, where you had 10, 15, 20, 25 places with a hub leader with resources and a mandate from Father General to do something, to impact, to change the way our societies relate to Islam. There'd be universities involved, there'd be social centers, there'd be journals, there'd be parishes. Imagine all that energy being liberated and being focused and being missioned. I'm not talking top down. I'm talking bottom up and then a mandate from the General. That's how the society works best. And we do need an urgency to fight the isms of our day. Individualism, extreme nationalism, consumerism. We're swimming in those waters. And I think we don't appreciate how dangerous they are. Just as in the 1930s and 40s in Germany, people didn't appreciate how dangerous National Socialism was, Nazism or Stalinism, where millions of people died. We and you as planners need to be prophets, to see these isms, to feel the pain of them, to really feel it, and to be determined in your provinces and regions and conferences to tackle those isms with indifference and with agility. This is where it's all going. This is what this restructuring is about. Recovering agility to really address important issues. It's not agility because it makes us feel good running around. It's agility to bring the kingdom of God. The world is saying, blessed are the rich, the powerful, the Elon Musks and the Trumps. Jesus isn't saying that. Totally different message. So how do we move people, how do you move people in your provinces and regions to feel with passion this urgency? It's part of your job as planners. It's a wonderful call. I echo again Pachi Alvarez. To feel with passion this urgency. One way is to start with the why. There's the famous book by Simon Sinek, who also is on on YouTube. Start with why. So many Jesuit websites are about the what. Whoops, 10 minutes. We run great schools. We have 20 parishes. We have 3 retreat houses. Where's the why? There's that phrase, if your dreams don't scare you, they're not big enough. Why are we missing vocations? Complex reasons, but perhaps we're not very good at articulating the why. I'm a Jesuit because I love Jesus Christ and because he called me. A why is God's dream. Does the expression God's will. I prefer the expression God's dream and the invitation to dream with God. So Ignatian. So the processes in the Curia, again, just to echo Father General yesterday, he says restructuring is another word for renewal. When we talk about the why and the dream and the urgency, which is our job to restructure so that the society can answer the needs, so that we can collaborate with the Trinity, so that the words we speak are put into action. And so all these processes that people sometimes complain about, too many processes, and also some of us here complain about, the preferences, the procurators, poverty, the new instruction on finance, the De Statu. I think it helps your provinces if they see all of those not as there's this, then there's that, then there's an. It's all about renewal. And it's an urgent project of renewal. Again, not so that we feel better, but so that we bring those values of the kingdom. Remember Francis Xavier? He said, I wish I could run through the universities of Europe and tell them the potential, tell them the needs, and tell those students to give up their small ambitions and come eastward to preach the gospel of Christ. I will go anywhere and do anything in order to communicate the love of Jesus to those who do not know him or have forgotten him. So inside a province or region, what do? I'm coming towards the end. You strengthen the local superiors like they've done in Spain and in the United States and Canada. You link up local communities and networks and works. I mentioned Valladolid and the platforms. You get delegates with a good job description who can ensure impact. You're creative. What do you do if you get blocked? You propose solutions. And you help people be indifferent and rediscover that flame that Jesus is passing on to Ignatius there. Ignatius poor and humble in that picture by Ignacy Flores, that cartoon Nasi is a teacher in one of our schools in Catalonia. And if a retreatant is blocked, Ignatius says, that's when the director or the accompanier gets active. If everything is going fine, you stand back. If the retreatant is blocked, you get active. So if your province or region is blocked, you get active. You propose things. You avoid should, but you look for ways to bring indifference. So there's some do's and don'ts there. Can you read the do's there on the left? Thank God for young people.
Engage your Jesuit and mission partners. Start conversations with neighboring provincials and their consults. Look at common challenges. Dream of how to address them together. Meet with younger Jesuits from the province near you. Renew your province with retreats and recollections and build indifference. Emphasize the priority of the mission. Finally, insist on spiritual, not bureaucratic processes.
Well, even he didn't make it through it almost. And don't wait till it's too late. Don't give in to fear or scaremongering. Don't get stuck in narrow models. And don't let one or two voices dominate the whole thing. A word on communications, my favorite topic. Regular and consistent communication is vital. I'm going to finish here. Because it reassures people and it tackles fake news. And it gets rid of gossip. Communications. But avoid too much talk about kitchen work. I've seen some province letters, and it's so detailed about the consult met on the 4th of January for 1.5 hours. And after a coffee break, we then, when you go to a meal with a friend, you don't want to know how much the carrots cost. Or if it's an Irish meal, how much the potatoes cost. You want to get the meal. And the people of God are longing for the meal. At the table are the poor and the sinners and the lepers. And Jesuits want to be there. They don't want to be in the kitchen discussing the potatoes. So watch that your communication isn't about the potatoes and the carrots and the recycling of the plastic and whatever else. Who'll wash up afterwards? They're all important. Here in the Curia, we're kind of in the kitchen. Let's be humble in this Curia. We're trying to prepare stuff so that you can serve the meal. And as planners, that's also a lot of the work we're doing. Communications can be the motor. It can show the path ahead. It can inspire, like the prophet Isaiah that the general talked about yesterday. Every valley of your province shall be lifted up. Every mountain can be brought down. We are showing a path in the wilderness of today's desert. A big impact on my life was when somebody I know died through suicide. And I realized so many things going on in people's hearts that you don't know about. Concluding lessons. There's the walk to Emmaus, which is a wonderful story with different elements. The Emmaus journey, part 1. We share our fears. You get your companions to share their fears. Our own hope had been we'd have more vocations. Our hope had been no sex abuse scandals in our province. A time of sharing and listening, honesty. Somebody mentioned yesterday to Father General, I think it was Joe Arun, unreal spiritual conversations where the real things don't get said. Emmaus chapter 2, invite Jesus in. Stay with us. You want to hear more. Time for prayer. Chapter 3, the breaking of the bread. Together, simple meals, celebrations, fraternity. And then recognizing Jesus. Our eyes are opened. I love the image on the left. The guy is just shot out of his chair and the chair falls back. He's so amazed and surprised. When I'm giving workshops to provinces, I say, when were you last amazed? And I send them off to pray on it. The Gospel of Mark, so many miracles. Jesus did this or that, and they were amazed. And they were astounded. And the crowds were amazed. Emmaus 5, there they are. The room is empty. They've set out with agility and with hope because they've gone through this process and they know the urgency. And they can face into Jerusalem. They can face it, but with terrific consolation. Herman, could you read that prayer?
Glory to God, whose power working in us can do infinitely more than we can ask or imagine. Glory to Him from generation to generation in the Church and in Christ Jesus forever and ever. Amen.
So thank you very much.
Thank you, John, for that presentation, and also thank you for not lingering too long on the British-Irish slide. I think it gets depressing as the points go down. My question is something that came up at our last province congregation, and this is a question about the relationship between structure and mission. And the question came up, should we clarify what our mission is before we talk about what structures will fit the mission and therefore, if needed, restructuring? Or do you sort of put a structure in place first and then the mission flows out of it? Or the structure clarifies the mission? So just wanted your thoughts on that.
Thank you. Father Maria.
I'm kind of going to express my fear. I think in the recent past, even now, there is a kind of narrative that is being narrated that we are holding on to institutions and schools, they are obstructing our mission, should we not give them up? On the other hand, don't we need institutions? And institutions in India, in places like India, they generate income and we really use that income for mission work. So are we emphasizing too much on negative narrative about institutions?
Father Paul.
Thank you. John, great presentation. I have two observations and one question. First observation, I think in the pictures of Emmaus, it was a story of Mr. and Mrs. Cleophas. You only have two men. So, observation one. Observation two, there was a time when aggiornamento was a buzzword. Then the word audacity came up. I think there's a new word coming up now, agility. Just an observation. And three, I strongly believe that all restructuring ultimately depends on the provincials. And it's great that you ask us, who are delegates for Apostolic Planning, to do something, but without the support, the initiative, and the desire of the provincial, not much happens. I was part of a team that was looking at restructuring in India. It was called the Reggae. And the greatest opposition to restructuring came from provincials, probably afraid that your own men would turn against them and say, have you forgotten our history? Have you forgotten our culture of our people? Why are you caving in? So, would it make sense to hold this presentation, to have it at some point when you have the major superiors present? Once they buy in, I think our work as the people coordinating, supporting, spreading the message of restructuring would move forward.
Father Sebasti, please.
I go very much in line with what Father Paul was saying just now. From the presentation is highly inspiring to me, and I liked it very much. What I liked most was the first point, universalism, or universality. You don't like ism, so universality. From my little experience, at least in the context of South Asia, universality is a problem, the concept or perspective. And I fully agree with Father Paul, it is not sufficiently found even among the provincials. Therefore, provincialism, which also was mentioned by you, is having upper hand. Are there ways to break this and promote the other? That is the real, according to me, that's the crux of the problem. It may be the same situation in other conferences. Because we are now 19 provinces within the country, there are 2 outside the country in the conference. Why? That's a real question.
Yes, as a former provincial, Sebasti. but he was very much, because I worked quite a bit with Sebasti, and he was very committed to a universal vision. Let me go to Kenzie's. Kenzie, thank you for the question. The big slogan is structures follow mission. Form follows function. I remember maybe 20 years ago, the United States provinces, when they were starting to think about restructuring, spent quite a bit of time in consultation to talk about the mission and the vision. And I think from that was born a kind of willingness to move forward and to restructure and to make sacrifices. So yeah, structures follow mission. And probably there's a little footnote that might say, well, when you're dreaming about the mission and discerning about it, you can simultaneously be thinking about the structures. It's not a kind of there's this and then there's that. But certainly in most parts of the Jesuit world, we have structures that really need to be evaluated. Do we still need those structures? Do we still need those ways of proceeding? And that's a very good question to ask in these things. Maria, institutions, and are we getting anti-institution? There's a bit of that, and I hope I didn't fall into that trap. I'm actually quite a fan of institutions. But institutions can become ends in themselves. And generals have said, how apostolic are they? We're an apostolic body for the service of faith, the promotion of justice and reconciliation. Can we ask each of our institutions to do an examine on their apostolicity, if that's a word, and to recover that sense, And when that has happened, painful at the start, challenging, fear-inducing, but when that has happened, it has released a great consolation. I really see that in Jesuit high schools, with which I'm quite familiar in my own country, Ireland. The school I went to there were many Jesuits there when I was there. Now there are very few. It's perhaps more Jesuit now than it was then. They have this great sense of Jesuit identity. And when you think of Jesuit high schools, 2 million students in our high schools worldwide, 2 million, with their families, their teachers. What a chance to build a gospel culture. What a way into the next generation. What a model of interreligious dialogue in that practical way. In India, Muslims, Hindus, Christians studying together at a young age. So I believe in institutions and how they can bring forward the mission. And in fact, we all know Jesuit individuals who kind of became untouchable in their individualism, and then they get sick, and then the work becomes a kind of crisis because they were the work. So I see the problem, but I'm a fan of institutions when they are helped, challenged, encouraged to be apostolic, and when they're focused on mission. And that's what planners can do also, to try and ensure that spirit of the society remains. Paul, Mr. and Mrs. Klopas, and the agility and making progress. Yeah, agility. Ignatius's big word was making progress. And when I think of Jesuits in formation, we all have to deal sometimes with Jesuits in formation, and it's wonderful to be with them, like the guys who are playing music with us. And you have to discern, and he's discerning, am I called to be a Jesuit? A key criterion I use is he making progress, or is he stuck? Is the vocation, is the life in the society helping this man to grow? Ignatius was so strong on this. Even when Ignatius says I forget what part of the Constitutions, when a Jesuit is dying, the superior should visit him and help him to make progress. It's really lovely. It's just lovely that Ignatius doesn't give up. Even when the person is, make progress so that he won't be afraid of passing into the next world. It's just such a care. So growth, agility, it's part of our cura personalis. It all goes together. It all depends on the provincial. Provincials are busy. Ideally, it's a collaboration. I know that, again, in Southern Africa, the recent process with Andrew as chairman of the group and Matthew, you've really helped the provincial Leonard Chidi. Leonard delegated the task of planning the process, and the group really ran with that task. And Leonard needed that because a provincial has many, many different concerns. But if the provincial isn't convinced, or if he's going to say, thank you for that report and I'll put it in the bin, that's not really much use. He has to really trust his people, and there has to be a good process around that. And I really agree about provincialism. We really have to change. A good example recently was when I visited Australia, and this dialogue with East Timor has been so respectful, so discerning, so positive, so helpful, because the Australian Jesuits want to break out of any kind of provincialism. They help many provinces in the Asia-Pacific Conference. There's a real opening of horizons. So whatever you can do to encourage your provincial not just to think of a province plan, but in the province plan, hey, we're part of a universal society. We're part of so how much of the plan takes that into account? Right.
Thank you, Father John. We'll take again a series of 3 questions. Yes, Father. I'm sorry, Damien, is it Father Damien? Okay, Danny.
Thank you, John. Just to make the point that you just made in your last comment, with Ed Facet workshop yesterday, we came up with this emphasis of how important it is for the planning process of a province to take into account the apostolic plannings of the surrounding provinces and the conference where you belong to. Even if it's not part of the mandate, I think just the fact of bringing that into consideration in your own province planning, I think it will help a lot to those future alignments to new levels of aggregation. And also I just want to call the attention to the importance of the conferences to create safe spaces for these new structures, because otherwise the provincials, they are usually the main obstacles because they are responsible of the structure they have behind them. And when you are responsible of a structure, it's not an easy step to move into an unknown, because we need to create safe spaces in the new level of aggregation. Otherwise, it's a responsibility of the provincial not to move forward till the conditions are somehow guaranteed. So I think there is a level of leadership beyond the province that can help the provincials to move forward without denying their responsibility. Thank you.
Yes, Father Titus.
Ignatius was surprised by the Spirit, and he moved from agility to stability through the institutions. I think the Spirit seems to be telling us now the time has come to move from institution stability to agility. My fear is that over in this district, provincial may say now, what has worked in the West might work in our province also, and try to merge the provinces. Because I feel what is a surprise from the Spirit to one part of the world may be a surprise from us to the Spirit. Your comments.
Thank you. Father Miro.
Okay, thank you. It's me. Just a question about this universalism or universality. There's something that always strikes me in this language. When we always only speak about universality, Father Rupe spoke about incarnation, and now we only speak about universality. The question is, incarnation has a space. I think I would be more happy if we speak of a tension between universality and incarnation. I imagine Father Rupe in those times, there was a big Latin issue, a big Eurocentrism, and he had to break with that and be more open to different cultures. The society was also, in the beginning, also very incarnated in different cultures and places. Now, we speak about only universalism or universality. I prefer it to be something like a tension between that and incarnation. So Jesuit communities should be like airports. I mean, in each country, airports are all the same everywhere. They're universal. So should the communities be everywhere the same? Or should incarnation have space here? So is there a risk of just speak English, learn English, and that is to be Jesuit? I exaggerate, but what is the role of incarnation here? Thank you.
Thank you, Father Jose. Father Francis.
Thank you, John, for a wonderful presentation. It was very inspiring to listen to you. Again, I'm coming back to the context of South Asia where taking off from Paul and Sebastian Raj, that the issue of universality. The examples that you've given to us are from those places in the society where the number is shrinking. Now, there are provinces, particularly in South Asia, where there's a feeling that some provinces are okay. And so there might be a tendency to not open to the universal reality. Would you have some pieces of advice for to those people? But the reality also is the other side, that recently we did the reimagining the society of Jesus in South Asia, wherein statistics say something else, that some provinces are really shrinking, and hence, within the conference and outside the conference, what sort of advice or role do you see as you go all around? Thank you.
Thank you. Now, Father John, could you give us some answers and enlightenment?
So, Danny, thank you. The key issue of provinces and regions taking into account neighboring provinces and regions, it links with Father General's plea to us yesterday: don't shrink the vision. And I've seen this danger with smaller provinces especially, or even with bigger ones, that you think of your province and you make a plan for your province. But if you had wider horizons, you do different things. The logic is perfectly fine within the small province or even the large province. But if you're thinking more universally, the logic changes and you see, wow, we shouldn't have closed that place, or we should have closed it, or we should have opened something different. I see missed opportunities. So even without changing province boundaries, which is always a sensitive issue, to look over the wall at least and dream together. I remember Father Nicolas used to say, the walls have become so thick. Can they become more porous? Can we even remove a brick that you can see through to the next place? But mistakes I've seen in province planning have been where a province does an excellent plan and everything makes sense within the framework that they're looking at, but they didn't look over the wall. Carlos Ernesto is running a workshop this afternoon, I think, tomorrow, which will deal with some of those issues. And Titus, you bring us back to the institutions issue. I think what we want is institutions with vision and agility. They're the ones that I can see really working, that they're solid, they're able to take on the challenges of the day, they have the resources, and we need them, but they really are engaged with this urgency thing. And that's worldwide. It's not a west-east thing or a north-south thing. It's institutions that have this urgency and that move with that urgency. Jose Mari, incarnation and universality, the tension. The general stresses interculturality. So he wouldn't like airports that have these horrible announcements from automatic voices. Now head to your prayer at 5 a.m. or something. We're really pushing that at the moment. You've probably seen the whole thing behind this translation system that has worked or not worked has been, well, let's have more than just the European traditional colonial languages. That was our big vision that Herman and I were trying to work on. And in the liturgy yesterday, the prayers from the different countries to say we have to break out of this mold. We have to not let English be the dominant language. I speak Gaelic. My mother was a very good Gaelic speaker. Some people were surprised when they heard me saying the Our Father the other day. They said, what language was that? So this is an issue to tackle that is very important. And Francis, I find South Asia incredibly open now. I go there quite a lot, to India and Sri Lanka. South Asia, I think probably 20 years ago, was very focused on formation within South Asia and contextual theology now, which is still important, but now you've added a huge dimension of internationality, a sense of commitment to the universal society, wanting to contribute. It's enormously positive. And I think we all need to have some sort of spiritual exercise where you say, imagine a renewed society of Jesus in my province, in Australia, or in Ranchi, or in Ecuador. What would that look and feel like? What would we be doing? How would we be living? A big concern for the general is the life mission balance and how the life part gets neglected. It gets neglected because we work too much. We work too much because we don't plan properly. And we don't want to let go of things. We're trying to keep everything going. And so we've entered into this serious imbalance of life mission. Keep everything going. So you as planners, you can really do something on that to help your provincials, to lead them to see the need to change, to adapt, to start new things, to let go of things. So that this hyperactivism thing gets addressed and we get back our balance, we can live as religious with a proper balance of life and mission. It's really key, and I'm convinced that planners play a key role. I really am.